crawl into that, and you're going to be warm enough to get through the night without any heating
They
device.
are.
There is a city in the Czech Republic that hands out small foam igloos to people sleeping on the street. Each one costs about $1,000. Each one runs close to 30 degrees warmer inside than the freezing air around it. And folded flat, 5 of them fit on a single wooden pallet. A French engineer built the first ones in his own workshop with his own money. But the reason he built them is the part almost nobody understands. And it starts with a number most of us would just call a chilly night. 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees above freezing. The kind of evening where you reach for a jacket on the way out the door and think nothing else about it. That number kills people every winter in the United States, and the reason why has almost nothing to do with ice. Hypothermia sets in when your core body temperature drops below 95 degrees, and the Centers for Disease Control has been explicit that it can kill at outside temperatures above 40. What decides it is whether you are wet, how many hours you are exposed, how old you are, whether you have eaten that day, and whether you have any way at all to get dry. A person sleeping outside fails almost every one of those tests at once. Their clothes are damp from rain or from sweat, or from hauling everything they own across town all afternoon. They are lying on concrete, and concrete pulls heat out of a human body far faster than cold air does. They often have not eaten, and they are usually a great deal older than most people assume. So nobody ever needed a blizzard. They needed a wet 40-degree night and enough hours in it. The National Coalition for the Homeless estimates that around 700 Americans who are homeless or at risk of it are killed by hypothermia every single year. On a single night in January of 2025, the Department of Housing and Urban Development counted roughly 745,000 Americans experiencing homelessness, and more than 250,000 of them were unsheltered. Not in a hostel or a transitional housing unit, but out on a street, in a parked car, in a tent behind a strip mall, in a shop doorway. On the 6th of January this year, in an industrial stretch of Sacramento County, California, a 55-year-old man named Jackie Feister was found dead. The coroner ruled it hypothermia. Friends described him as a loving man, devoted to kindness and to his family. 3 days earlier, in the same county, a man named Kenneth Steele had died the same way at 41. The low temperature on the night Jackie Feister died was around 36 degrees. In California, hold that number because inside one of the foam shells we started with, he would have been sleeping in the 60s. And that raises the question everyone asks at this point, usually with a shrug. Why don't they just go to a shelter? It sounds perfectly reasonable until you actually listen to the answers. If you have a dog, most shelters will not take you. For someone who has lost their job, their marriage, their home, and their health, that animal is often the last living thing on earth that still loves them, and they will sleep in the rain before they hand it over to anybody. If you are a couple, most shelters separate you. Men's floor, women's floor, no exceptions made. After 30 years of marriage, some people quietly take the parking lot instead. Then there is everything else. If you have been drinking, you are turned away at the door. If you arrive after curfew because a shift ran long, the door is already locked. If you have a cart holding everything you own, there is nowhere to put it, and leaving it outside means it is gone by morning. If you have post-traumatic stress, and a great many homeless veterans do, sleeping in an open room with 60 strangers is not rest. It is a night spent lying awake with your back against a wall. And if you were ever robbed or assaulted in a shelter, you made a permanent decision about shelters that afternoon. So the beds sit empty, the people sit outside, and every January the same stories run in the same local newspapers. The man who decided to do something about that is named Geoffroy de Reynal. He is a French engineer with a master's degree in energy engineering, and he spent his career on wind turbine construction sites working as a quality manager. Then he took a job abroad and spent about a year living in Montenegro. When he came home, something looked wrong to him. He told ABC News that in Montenegro he had barely seen anyone living outside, and that coming back to France, the number of people sleeping in doorways hit him like a slap. He had walked past it his whole adult life and stopped seeing it. A year away had reset his eyes. Plenty of people have that moment. They feel terrible for an afternoon, and then life carries on. De Reynal went home and started running numbers instead. Because he is an engineer, he did not see a housing problem at all. He saw a thermal problem. A human body at rest throws off heat continuously, all night long, roughly like a small light bulb burning under a blanket. That heat was never the issue. The issue is that it vanishes instantly into open air, into soaked cardboard, into freezing concrete that drags warmth out of a person from underneath. So the question got very simple. How do you catch that heat and hand it back? What he built is called the Igloo. It is a curved shell of polyethylene foam, the same family of material used in building insulation and shipping packaging, lined on the inside with a layer of aluminium. The aluminium reflects body heat back toward the sleeper instead of letting it drift out through the walls. By the project's own figures, it runs about 27 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer inside than outside for one person, and roughly 36 degrees warmer with two people sharing. At 20 degrees outside, the person inside is in the high 40s. At Jackie Feister's 36 degrees, they are in the 60s. Not comfortable, not a home. The difference between waking up and not waking up. The details underneath that headline number are where the real thinking shows. The interior is fireproof, and that was deliberate. People sleeping rough use candles. They use small camp stoves. They smoke. Things get knocked over at 3 in the morning. A shelter that traps heat brilliantly and then catches fire is not a shelter at all. It is a coffin. A Czech social worker running one of these programs put it bluntly, saying that if a client smoked in there, they could not set anything alight. The shell is waterproof the whole way through, with no seams to leak and no tent poles to snap in wind. There are 8 ventilation holes built into it, which sounds like a footnote until you consider that the #1 failure of every improvised shelter, every tarp, every parked car, is condensation. Trapped moisture soaks bedding, soaks clothes, and wet is what actually kills you. They engineered that out on purpose. It has no loose parts at all, nothing to drop in the dark, nothing to assemble wrong, nothing that fails when your hands are numb. It unfolds and locks into shape in under a minute. There is solar lighting inside, so the person can switch on their own light in their own space whenever they want. Someone sleeping rough has not controlled a light switch in years, and folded flat, 5 of them fit on one standard wooden pallet. That single detail is what makes the whole thing work at city scale. A pickup truck carries 20. A church basement stores 100. De Reynal built the first units with his own money, then put the project online and asked the public to fund the rest. The campaign brought in around $20,000, far more than he had expected. That first winter, he produced 20 prototypes. 10 went to Bordeaux, 10 went to Paris. Run the arithmetic on that first batch, and you land at roughly $1,000 each. For a hand-built prototype run, that is what it costs to keep one human being from freezing for an entire season. The reports came back fast. A man named Christian, 58 years old, was given one just outside Paris. His verdict was that it was perfect, absolutely perfect, and that sometimes he actually got too warm and had to sleep with his jacket off. Consider that sentence coming from a man who had been sleeping outdoors in January. A young couple, both 21, had been living rough for months in a wooded park on the edge of the city. After they were given one, they said the thing that has stayed with me most out of all of this. They said it was easier to fall asleep at night and easier to get up in the morning. That is not a sentence about temperature. That is a sentence about whether a person can still face a day. But an invention sitting in a workshop helps nobody, and that is where one specific city comes into it. Ostrava is an industrial city in the eastern Czech Republic. Coal mines, steelworks, heavy manufacturing, the kind of place that built a country and then watched the industry that built it wind down. If you want an American reference point, think Pittsburgh or Youngstown. A couple living there read a news story one morning about a homeless man who had frozen to death in a mining town half an hour up the road. Neither of them worked in social services. They found a video of de Reynal kneeling in the snow beside one of these shells and got in touch. And instead of guarding the design, he shared it. Then they did the thing that separates this from every well-meaning charity drive you have ever seen. They did not start handing shelters out. They went to the Ostrava branch of the Salvation Army, an organization whose outreach workers already knew the people sleeping rough in that city by name, not as case numbers, by name. Those workers were brought in to help write the operating rules before a single unit was placed. Then the Salvation Army, the city of Ostrava, and the Igloo team signed a three-way agreement, and a pilot launched for the winter of 2018 into 2019. The first units went to a short list of about 10 people, chosen on age, on whether mental illness made a shelter impossible, and on how far someone had drifted from any service at all. Then, the temperature dropped and the phone started ringing. Word moved through the homeless community faster than anyone had predicted. Their own clients started asking. Social workers from other organizations started calling. One staff member said plainly that they had not seen that coming. A few people tried to hand theirs back during a mild first week. Then the real cold arrived and they changed their minds. Nobody gave one back after that. The next season, the city went from 14 units to 20, including larger two-person models for couples who stay outside together rather than be split up at a shelter door. Now, the people. There is a man the project calls Mr. Libor. He had lived in the woods outside the city for 8 years. He worked more than 13 years underground in the coal mines and was granted a disability pension after the mines took his hearing. Then, after 10 years, the government reassessed him, decided his condition was not serious enough, and cut the pension off. He would not enter a shelter, partly because he did not want to sleep surrounded by strangers, and partly because he has 3 dogs and the dogs cannot come in. He spent a winter in an igloo instead, with the dogs, warm. What happened next was not really about warmth. It was about trust. Before that winter, his relationship with the outreach workers had been fragile, the way it always is with a man who has spent 8 years learning that people carrying clipboards tend to make things worse. After they gave him that shelter and kept coming back to check on him through the snow, something shifted. He let them help. He registered with the labor office. He qualified for benefits again. He still has not found housing that will take him with 3 dogs, but he is inside the system now instead of invisible to it. And all of that started with a foam dome in the trees. Then there is a man the project calls Mr. Vlada. At the end of 2018, he was living in a hut with his wife and a friend when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Early the next year, his wife was diagnosed with cervical cancer and died shortly after. Grieving and dying himself, he invited his friend and the friend's girlfriend to move in with him. They pushed him out of his own hut. He ended up under a bridge. After New Year, he contacted the Salvation Army's street workers himself and asked whether he could have one of these. The people running the project wrote afterward that they could not adequately describe how much his story had affected them and that they were simply glad it would be their shelter keeping him warm. That is the pattern that repeats. The shelter stops the fall long enough for everything else to become possible. Before we go on, I want to say something directly to some of you watching. A lot of you are not here out of curiosity. Some of you are 2 missed payments from losing the roof over your head. Some of you are already in a car or on a relative's couch, quietly counting weeks. Some of you are on a fixed income watching the rent climb faster than the Social Security check. And some of you are trying to help someone you love who keeps refusing every offer you make. I put together a guide called the Veteran's Blueprint. It began as a resource for former service members because they fall through these cracks at a terrible rate, but nearly all of it applies to any American who has come loose from the housing system. Which door to knock on first when you have days instead of months. How to get a usable mailing address when you do not have a home. What to actually say to a caseworker so a file gets opened instead of closed. The link is in the description below. Now, here is the part of this story that impressed me more than the engineering, and it is the opposite of what you would expect. You cannot buy one of these. I cannot buy one. If you saw someone sleeping in a doorway tonight and wanted to order them a shelter tomorrow morning, the answer is no. They sell only to charities and to city governments, and only on conditions. The organization has to know the person individually, as a human being, and not as a file. The location is chosen together with that person, in a quiet area away from the town center, with local authorities at least tolerating it. Outreach workers have to keep visiting through the winter, and they have to bring more than the shelter itself. Conversation, warm clothes, food, help with paperwork. And every spring, the shelters are collected back in, washed, disinfected, repaired, folded flat, and stored in the dark until November, because sunlight degrades the foam. Every one of those rules exists to stop this becoming the thing critics feared, which is a pod dumped on a pavement so that everyone can stop feeling guilty and keep walking past. So why is none of this in America? It is certainly not the cost. American cities spend more than $1,000 per person on a single encampment cleanup. Part of the answer is that we went a different direction entirely. In 2024, in Grants Pass versus Johnson, the Supreme Court ruled that cities may penalize people for sleeping outside even when no shelter bed is available, and sweeps have accelerated across the country ever since. We have built our own versions, and some of them work beautifully. Pallet, based in Washington State, makes hard-sided emergency shelter units now deployed in more than 100 communities. In Eugene, Oregon, a nonprofit builds insulated Conestoga huts for around $1,000 in materials, and that design is now used in 46 states. The ideas exist here. What is missing is the permission. In most American cities, placing a small shelter on a church parking lot violates zoning, and the permit process outlasts the winter. Jackie Feister was 55 years old. Somewhere in Sacramento County, there is a night in early January where 36 degrees was survivable if he had been dry and behind a door and asleep. Nobody needed to invent anything to save him. It had already been invented for about $1,000, 5 to a pallet, 5,000 miles away. De Renal has been asked about America directly, and he named the city he wants to reach: Chicago. Cold, snowy, and full of people who have nowhere to be at 2 a.m. in January. He has never once claimed this is the answer. He said early and plainly that he is not trying to replace emergency housing, that he is trying to make life slightly less difficult for people sleeping outside, and that having one of these does not mean you are no longer homeless. There is a man in Ostrava the local press called Mr. Vitek. He spent a whole winter in one, and every day, after hours out in the cold, he came back to a space that was his. Not a queue, not a dormitory floor. His. When the loan period ended in the spring, he realized he did not want to give it up. The reporting said it had stopped being protection from frost somewhere along the way and become a fixed point, a quiet place in an otherwise unquiet world. He handed it back, because that is how the program works, and it went off to be cleaned and folded and stored in the dark until November. But he had spent an entire winter warm, behind a door he could close, and somewhere in that winter he had started being treated like a person again. That is what $1,000 bought. Not a house, not a policy, not a 10-year strategy document. One warm winter, and the beginning of everything that comes after one. If this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. I find the people who quietly fix what our institutions have given up on, and I tell you about them every week.